By the year 2000, it was curtains.
Disaster.
Really. Yes, we had won COSAFA twice by the year 2000.
I remember 1998. I went to watch a match in Woodland Stadium. I can't remember who was playing. And at halftime, I asked myself, what am I doing here? It's not entertainment. I'd rather go home and watch a movie or
How
something.
many people were in the stadium?
By that time, you could see the numbers dwindling because the quality was dropping. Now, if your quality is dropping, your gate takings are dropping. So you are in a catch-22 situation. Your money is dropping, so you can't develop. And your standard is low, so people will not come. So it was a difficult situation. But, further down the road we changed. But as you say, probably around 2000 was one of our lowest moments in football.
Did you feel like this football thing in Zambia is not working?
Yeah, but I'd left to work in South Africa, so I was not so much between 98 and 2016. I was a little bit out of the scene, but my heart was still there. I still followed what was happening. When I was in town, I would meet. I got involved in, for example, setting up Liwewe United with my business partner Charles Nshimbi, my business friend. I would come in from SA, have meetings, go back to SA because my passion was still there. And we said, look, let's try and do a model at Liwewe United that can maybe show that this football can run on a commercial.
What was the idea?
Our idea was to partner with the city council, which we did, to then, and the city, they had this area called KPF, big area where the Garden Park Stadium is, was now to bring in a partner to do some property development, much like what is now is happening at City of Lusaka in 2018, 2019. But we had this idea in 2001 to say we'll get an investor because it's in Parklands, which is one of your most prominent areas in terms of high economic value customers, to build a shopping structure there. From this land, because it's just sitting idle, this structure will have a partnership with the club, and these then resources will then be channeled towards the club to run itself. Because as you said earlier, football on its own, in our current level of development, cannot stand. A club may make 50, 40, 60% of what it does, but there's still that gap to be filled. Some of the clubs maybe only make 10% of what it costs because they're not doing any commercial activity. So this structure with a commercial partner who has built a shopping mall there, channeling a deal that channels some of the resources towards the club would make the club sustainable. Unfortunately, we discussed it, we had it on paper, but when it came to putting pen to paper, the council dilly-dallied until, my business partner, Mr. Nshimbi, and myself, we felt this thing will never take off because as long as we don't sign, we can't get the partner to come on board and build the shopping facility. But I'm glad to see it has happened at City of Lusaka, because it's a turnaround now. It's still in transition phase, but once the mall is complete, once the deal is implemented, you will see City of Lusaka have resources, which it struggled, and we've seen City as a historical club, but struggling over the last 2-3 decades. Now they will have stability of finances.
You had Liwewe United for 9 years, and even today, the club is not in a pretty financial position. Is it fair to say that the current woes that the team has is as a result of inertia or red tape to actually get itself out of this pickle many years ago when they had an opportunity and you people walked away as a result?
Look, they've done well because they came back to the Premier League, and I took my hat off to the mayor, Christopher Kangombe, for the support he gave the club to get it back into the Premier League. But this year they've gone down again, and they have to probably try and work out a model, because based on council resources, it's not going to be able to compete with the clubs who have companies who put in more money, or clubs who are more generating commercial value. So it has to be a partnership, I feel, between the community and the city council. City council is struggling, but Liwewe has a huge business community, needs to tap into that community.
The council, with hindsight, should they bite the bullet for having failed to actualize the project and the idea you had with Mr. Nshimbi?
The council at that time, because it's obviously management has evolved, we're talking about 9 years down the road. The council at that time, I think, missed an opportunity to turn the club, to turn that facility into a sports hub, because obviously we were thinking beyond football, to turn it into a multi-sport facility.
With hindsight, why was there inertia?
Well, they've got their own reasons. We were never given an explanation.
I'm saying in your heart, when you sit in a quiet place.
I think people are afraid to make decisions. I see it a lot. You know, I worked in SA. I was a middle manager at some stage, but I was empowered to make decisions. You know, I had a budget and I was able to make decisions. But you walk into a company here, even the top man is scared to make a decision. And I think probably the council felt, hey, if we sign a deal with these guys, you know, and it doesn't work out, it will be my job on the block, or I may lose this, or these guys may make millions, and then you know, will be left out.
I'm thinking it's a political system. Would it have been prudent to say, look, the council or the mayor won't be able to make a decision? Let's try to speak maybe to the Minister of Sport or the provincial minister, somebody senior who could probably understand what we were saying.
We had an agreement on paper, signed, 75% and 25%.
For the council?
Yes, because we are bringing in the partners, we are bringing in the money, we are bringing in the development. We are giving you 25%, you don't have to pull a penny out of your pocket. Whatever is built and developed from here, 25% will come to the council. The guy who has invested will obviously want his return. That's why he's got the majority share, because he's pumping millions of dollars here. So they missed the revenue opportunity, and to build something in a community that, you know, needed to have something built there, because you can imagine that Buchi area, how much development, how much investment, how much employment would be created by such a facility there. How many opportunities for the young kids to be involved in sport from that community would be. So it was a missed chance, I believe. They had their reasons.
Did you leave Kitwe United frustrated?
Disappointed, more than frustrated. Disappointed.
How did you leave?
Yeah, I think, you know.
And why did you leave?
Firstly, let me say a little bit about the record, because when we were there, we were constantly in the top half of the league for the period we were there. We won the BP Cup, the first time in 37 years Kitwe United had won a cup in 2004, the BP Cup, and since then they haven't won a cup. So we made some progress. But at the end of the day, you know, it was unfair for my partner to be pumping money from his personal resources to be trying and sustaining the club while none of his plans of development were taking place. At the end of the day, he felt he had pumped in enough, and if we were not going to do this deal, it was better for him to walk away and focus on his business.
You agreed with him?
I agreed with him 100%. Because, you know, sometimes I would see him take out money and put it in the club and pay players. And he's got family, he's got kids, he's got workers to pay. You know, and the pinch of what he was taking out of the club would obviously impact on other areas of his life. I felt it wasn't fair on him. And I was an employee, so I could chip in a little bit here and there, but he was carrying the main burden, and it was just not fair for him to continue.
If we could turn back the hands of time, would you make the proposal differently? Would there be anything you'd love to do differently regards your time at Kitwe United?
I think the proposal was solid. I would love to. Maybe,
up to today, you can still cash it again.
Of course, I mean, we're seeing it happening at Woodlands there. And that will be really a turnaround for City of Lusaka once that facility is up and running. You know, if only we had done it then in 2001, maybe 5 or 6 other clubs maybe would have adopted the same model. But it's taken 18 years before we could see somebody else now, you know, take the same approach which we could have done then.
You go to Power Dynamos with, because he's the president of the Football Association of Zambia, his name is worth mentioning, Andrew Ndanga Kamanga. Let's talk about when you met the man. When did you meet Andrew Ndanga Kamanga?
Now we go back a long way. We studied together at the Copperbelt University. So I've known him probably since 1986 or so.
And then you meet at Power Dynamos, and sure, both of you football fanatics. Maybe I want to speculate that he could have been your fan. How you,
We were friends,
friends?
good friends. Even today. Today, from here, I'm going to have a cup of coffee with him at his office and chat football, talk about COSAFA, and, you know, the next steps. There are more challenges ahead. So we're still very much in touch.
You went to Power Dynamos together. What was your motivation?
He was actually involved with us at Kitwe United because he worked on the financial side of the plan. So our involvement in football goes back to, he was the third person in the structure with Mr. Nshimbi, myself, and himself. So further down the road now, we have a chat, and you know, he's looking at Power Dynamos as an option. You know, he runs his own business. There's an option to maybe run a football club, because we've looked, we've actually visited a club in South Africa which we considered buying, but we say to ourselves, say, look, why should we invest in South Africa when we have our own teams in Zambia? So we say, let's have a chat with Power Dynamos. So we go to meet Mr. Hanson Sindowe, at the time the chairman of CEC, to discuss the possibility of getting involved in Power Dynamos, either to purchase shares or outright purchase. You know, there were the two options: either look at buying it as a whole, or putting some money and becoming a partner a shareholder in Power Dynamos Football Club. So he says, yeah, look, we have discussions on and off, and then he says, look, I think it would be nice for you guys to be in the committee and have a look and see what is there, how it's structured, how it's working. Which is how in 2013 both of us were put on the Power Dynamos board, and we find ourselves involved with Power Dynamos. Now, Mr.
How did it go?
Decided we were fishing around looking for something to do in football. He traveled to South Africa. We had a couple of meetings with the club owner. And then, you know, we sat down and said, look, why don't we look at doing something with a Zambian club rather than, you know, doing something with South Africa? So we met Mr. Hanson Sindowe from CEC, looking at the possibility of either Mr. Kamanga's company buying Power Dynamos in full 100% or buying a share in Power Dynamos to become a shareholder. So Mr. Sindowe suggested, he said, okay, since you guys are looking at this thing, why don't you sit on the board for Power Dynamos? So that
they were open to the idea?
Yeah, they were open. I mean, you know, a fresh injection of funds, if it's a shareholder, or if we agree, you know, to do an outright purchase. They were willing to look at it. So we discussed, and he says, look, you should maybe sit on the board and see, you know, how the club runs, what is in it, you know, and maybe after that viewpoint, then you can come back and we have a further discussion. So we were put on the board, which, you know, I think we had mixed fortunes during that year, because Power Dynamos came second to Zesco, and we felt, you know, at the end of the season that this club could have won the league. It was going to be a lovely opportunity for Power Dynamos to win the league. And if you look at their performance since then, they haven't really been in contention for the league title. That was the last time in 2013. We sat on the board, but we noticed one or two things. I mean, firstly, it was difficult to get a meeting. So we waited 1 or 2 months, and after our introduction, there was no meeting. So we called and said... Executive
committee meeting of the club.
Yeah, correct. We said, but we've been here 2 months, we've never had a meeting. How are we going to make things happen? And this was, we were on the board from about probably January. So it's like 2 months before the start of the season. So eventually you had to push and get the board meeting.
Was that as the culture that you found?
Well, later on I spoke to somebody who came in after us, and he said he had never attended a board meeting despite being appointed. I said we had to fight to get those meetings. So we sort of understood that when we pushed for those meetings, there were sort of, the employees of the company would probably make decisions in their own meetings without the executive meeting. And we tried to change that culture so that the decisions were made in the executive meetings. It was quite difficult to force for those meetings to take part. And I think that was probably, towards the end of the season, one of the reasons the club became undone and didn't win the league, because they had the momentum in the beginning. For example, we brought a proposal that, you know, the team must win 5 games in a row, and we give them a double bonus. And if you recall that season, the first 5 games, the team was on fire. 5 games, 5 wins. It was time to pay the bonus. Then there's inertia and, you know, bureaucracy.
There was no money, or?
I think you know, the processes were a little bit cumbersome, because CEC as a company, And Power Dynamo as a football club, are operating at different speeds. So Power Dynamos wins the first 5 games. The team is on top of the table, by a reasonably healthy margin. I don't think any other team won 5 in a row. So to get that double bonus now, it was delayed. And the players responded unhappily. So the next 5 games, it was now, I think, 4 losses and 1 draw. And we said, but look, we gave the players assurances that this is the structure.
Well, you made that decision in an executive meeting.
Correct. 5 games, double bonus. Next 5, if you win the next 5, double bonus. So they win the first 5, the bonus is delayed, it's not paid. First week it's delayed. No, we'll try and sort it out. Second week, third week, the next 5 games the team loses 4 and draws 1. Why? The players are unhappy. You've assured them of something that will be done. It is not done. They expect that money in their pockets. They don't have it. They respond. So suddenly the momentum is lost. So we had those difficulties. I think you will find that the employees who sit on the board, and I'm not blaming them or anything, are somehow restricted by the decisions of the company CEC as a company versus Power Dynamos as a football club. Not that they're not making decisions, but the decisions they operate at different speeds. Football needs instant decisions. It needs, if it's time for bonus, it's time for bonus. If we say, we need to raise the players' salaries, how are we going to do it? We need to get maybe a portion of the gate takings and channel it. The gate takings, at the time, were going back to the company, not into the club's coffers. So we say we want to get a star player, for example. So I'm not going to mention this player's name, but we said, hey, this player is in the market. But the structure restricted at the time, the highest paid players were probably like 6,000 because the structure and the format that is used at the club can't allow you to pay more than that. Okay, there are other benefits, fringe benefits, but we're talking about cash in your pocket. So this star player is obviously not going to come and play for 6,000 kwacha. We'll need to give him an additional revenue. How are we going to get that additional revenue? Because the regulations don't allow that. So we say we have to find a flexible way. Maybe if the gate takings go to the club, we can then use a portion of the club's, and add it onto their salary, and then be able to pay players at a higher level to be competitive in the market. Because your competitors are paying 12,000, 15,000. And if you take the 6,000 off, and true to the player went elsewhere. So it's been very difficult, and that's why with this club licensing that has come in, the independence of the club has been aggressively spoken about and pushed. And we're seeing now with club licensing, the club is becoming more and more independent. But there are still structural problems about how the corporate CEC and the club Power Dynamos are operating. And it's not only, probably some other clubs have it. Others have been able to manage it better. I think Zesco have managed it better. And you can see the result with Zesco United.
Did you have the opportunity to speak to Hanson Sindowe regards this? Listen, we've made this decision. We have to pay. And there was inertia, and you made a decision that was not going to be tenable at CEC level.
Well, the chairman sits on the board. So board meetings will maybe 4 times a year, maybe a little bit more. He's not involved in the day-to-day decision making of CEC. So we had to try, and accelerate the whole process. But they've got their own rules, regulations, processes as a corporate, and it impacts on the club.
So did the executive committee consult with the cooking pot or the piggy bank regards paying? Because
look, we were outside board members.
You made a decision in isolation.
We were outside.
CC didn't know that you were telling the players you were going to give them a bonus after 5 matches.
2 executive committee members were out. 3 were outsiders. The other 6 or so were CEC employees. So they are well aware, including people from their finance department. They are well aware of the resolutions. But you take that resolution to the company has its own internal processes.
Which you didn't know about?
Well, they have their internal processes, which was said, oh, we have our own. Yeah, but you know, you're running a club here, and we as an executive, including yourselves who work for the company, have agreed that we will do this thing to get the results. We've got the results. You know, now the inertia or the bureaucracy has to be worked around to ensure that the momentum continues. But it stayed as it is, and the momentum dipped. So after 10 matches, we have lost 4, whereas after 5 matches, we had won 5, and the impact was there immediate. So those are some of the issues that we faced, and I think hopefully now with club licensing, it's less of a problem. So we ran into those kind of issues, but we kept a decent amount of momentum. And as I said, we came second.
What was the bigger devil? The 6 CEC employees that were on the board, or the CEC board itself, regards you failing to honor that promise?
Difficult to say, because you know, the 6 sitting in the company are also in the executive are also part of the company. So they were sort of caught in the middle, you know. And also, if you're not in the department that does the payments, it's very difficult. For example, if you are in PR, to be able to ensure that the payment is done. I think the difficulty was the structure of or the relationship between company and club. Not so much individuals, but that link, you know, that caused slow movement whenever a decision is made. Decision will be made quickly, the response will come, but it will come maybe later.
Does this, in a nutshell, explain, just briefly, the performance of Power Dynamos post-2010? Yes, 2011 won the league, but yeah, it's been difficult.
I think it goes beyond
does it explain
it's even
anything?
before 2010. Because if you looked at Power Dynamo's 5 league titles, they were between 1984 and 2004. They won 5 league titles. Between then and now, between 2004 and 2019, they've only won 1 league title.
2011.
Correct.
So
this is a problem that stems from that time to now. You know, that 1 league title is not a reflection of what Power Dynamos should be. Because Power Dynamos traditionally is one of your biggest clubs in Zambia, is the only club to win the African champion, is only second to Nkana in terms of league title, always gave you, you know, top players for the national team. I think we now only have 1 or 2 if you look at the last COSAFA team, and probably if you looked at the senior national team, real national team, they probably wouldn't have a player in that team. So Power Dynamos has fallen, you know, from its high status as you know, a champion of Africa, one of the best clubs in Zambia, to become an also-ran now, mid-table side.
Would you agree to say it's been run down because of the handlers?
I would say it hasn't been able to achieve because it operates with a structure that is not appropriate for running a football club.
By the handlers?
By whoever runs the club. Handlers change, but the system remains the same. By the system. They've been let down by the system. So there needs to be a realignment of how that relationship between company and club operates. And whoever you put there, whether you took me back or brought in management from England, would still face the same problem, as long as the structural imbalances are there.
Based on your experience at Kitwe United and Power Dynamos, would you say there's probably something, and I mean at personal level, every human being needs to grow. Is there a place in your heart where you think that probably if I personally, as Ponga, conducted myself this way, or I'm too strong here when I should be soft, or I'm soft here when I should be hard. Is there anything about your character that you'd say you take responsibility for?
Well,
for your time at Kitwe United and Power Dynamos?
Everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. You know? Well, Power Dynamos was just a year stint. You know, I thought after the first year when we took the team to second, despite the difficulties, you know, Power Dynamos then informed Mr. Kamanga and myself that, you know, they didn't inform us, we just read in the newspaper that there were changes to the board. So, you know, we were never really able to develop any momentum with that project. Did
you feel like a blue-eyed boy? You and Andrew Ndanga Kamanga? Like they're checking us out now because they feel we're spoilers. We are playing with the harmony.
I think we were a little bit aggressive in trying to bring things to happen, and maybe, you know, the way we approached it, or the desire to change, our changes maybe were too much or too fast. I don't know, but we were never given an explanation. We were just told, we were not told, we just read in the paper that, oh, Power Dynamos, in fact, some big headlines, Ponga Kamanga dropped in one of the newspapers. So that was how we were informed. But, well, we said we did our bit. We took them to second. We, you know, tried to make some changes. Hopefully the team can do better. I'm a Power Dynamo supporter since 1982. So my heart is in the club, you know. I was there in the celebrations 91 when we won the cup as Power Dynamos with my good friends. We partied the whole night. You know, Peter Kaumba is a good friend of mine. We drink tea regularly, recall the old days. So my heart is in the club. I feel a sense of loss that so many years have gone by, and, you know, the team can't make an impact in Zambian football. And, you know, we made a little contribution. I would have loved to make more contribution, hopefully, with the aim of taking the club back to where it was.
So you tell me that Enfin was the company that was supposed to buy Power Dynamos off.
Either buy it or buy shares in it, depending on what where the discussion would take us.
So
but we never got to that.
After you were dropped using a big newspaper headline,
it was then impossible for us to
so there was
that
no
discussion.
You've never had a conversation with Hanson Sindo or anybody at Power Dynamos. Oh, gentlemen, by the way, earlier on last year we came and said we wanted to buy. Are we still talking business?
I think the ending of our time on the board sort of spoilt the opportunity to.
It was acrimonious?
Further. On their side, I think, because, you know, they felt, you know, we just read newspaper headlines, and in that environment, it's impossible to take the discussion further.
Yourself and Andrew Kamanga, have you ever been curious to really know what was the untold story? What was not told to the reporter? We
left it at that. They've made their decision. You know, life goes on. There's other things.
But it had nothing to do with them paying for the bonuses.
It could have. I don't know.
Was that what cost you?
No, that was just one example of some of the issues we faced in the running of the club. You know. So there were other issues where, as I said, the speed of the company and the speed of the team were not the same, and things were not done in time, which impacted on the team's performance. That is why I said earlier that year Power Dynamos should have won the league, but didn't. So maybe our involvement in the board, you know, where we tried to push things a little bit more aggressively as outsiders, probably that was something that was frowned upon or, you know, looked at differently. But at the end of the day, we just read in the newspapers and we moved on. Life goes on. Football goes on. You know, wasn't the end of the world.
And you didn't want to buy any other club?
We haven't looked at it since, because we didn't look at it afterwards, because I think I was obviously back in SA now and involved in other projects. He was doing his own things. And then, you know, eventually he was more involved in the race to get into the association. So I think that sort of took up his interest more than involvement in running a club.
Let's talk about his race to trying to get into FAS. With hindsight, how would you describe it?
I think he did the impossible by winning the presidency, because he was obviously taking on an icon of Zambian football. He was regarded as an outsider. He had the issues at Kabwe Warriors where the team was relegated. Although, you know, when you look into it a little bit deeper, you know, there were one or two question marks about how they got relegated regarding referees. But that's a story for another day. But anyway, he was more than an underdog when he went into the race. And he did his homework. He went club to club, he spoke to everybody, presented his case. And at the end of the day, he was able to win a narrow victory and become the FA president. So I take my hat off to him for the way he ran that campaign, because he was virtually an outsider in terms of winning the race.
Did you actually support him? And there are certain commentators of the game that will actually say he he used illegal tactics, especially when it came to the formation of the National Football League. What conversations did you have with him regards that?
Are we talking about the first time or the second time?
The first time. That was
Okay.
post 2010.
All right.
When the National Football League is formed.
Okay.
And you are a friend of Andrew Kamanga for over the years. So I'm
Well,
sure you were in contact
Yeah.
with him. And it was said that his action to form that was illegal. He was being a rebel. He was labeled all these things. Was that a fair way to describe him? Did you support his cause?
Well, I would say if you took a few steps back, you would remember that there were several issues in the way FAS was running its affairs. One of them, the trip to Ghana, where we had to use students to play against the Black Stars.
London.
Yes, to the trip in London. And the issue of the referees, whether the game against Comoros, when the referees were unable to come on time because they were paid late. And I think there was a general sense of disillusionment among certain people in the fraternity, who then approached him and said, look, we want to relook this football thing, the way it's managed and run, because there are certain problems that keep on cropping in the game. And thereafter there was the issue where now several members were expelled, and certain views said the constitution meant there should be re-election. Others were of the view that no, the president can replace. So there were all those issues. I mean, I've always observed Zambian football, been involved in Zambian football. Clearly things were wrong. There were issues whether, when certain quarters in the association and in the clubs rose against it. So there was discord in Zambian football at the stage. Obviously not good for the country. There should have been ways and means of, the two parties getting together to resolve their problems in football. The house was split, and I think today in 2019, those splits are still there in the game, and it hasn't really helped. But at the end of the day, football needs to harmonize. And, when the split was there way back 2009, 2010, there was opportunity for the football fraternity to get back together, but it was more a situation where it was polarized, where one party felt, oh, these guys challenged us and therefore we'll do everything to keep them out of the game and bring them down. And that culture and trend has continued to this day in 2019. It's a pity because we've lost a decade in football where we could have made progress.
Was Andrew Kamanga right to push that hard, personally?
I think he was called upon by certain clubs and associations, and he sat in that seat, Probably I would say there was a lot wrong and there was need to change something, but that change, didn't come about. And he was asked by the membership, part of the membership, to lead that drive for change. And it didn't happen then, but it happened later. So, the fact that there was something wrong, I think there was need. And whether his move to lead those clubs was the right channel or not, but there was need for football to get back together, and the leadership at the time, the people running the game, should have tried to harmonize rather than polarize, because again the polarization is still felt today.
Tell me something. How would you describe your relationship with Kalusha Bwalia over the years? He's one of the actors through your career. Is that you're commentating about the game, you're administering at the game, and his name is not very far. How would you describe your relationship with him over the years as we build up to that? Because the question at the end would be, you probably knew each other, drank tea or coffee together, the same way you drink tea and coffee with Andrew Kamanga and many other footballing personalities. How did we split to this level?
That's a personal story, but I'll give you a summary of it. We knew each other a long time, probably from the 80s when he was in the national team. He came back after his career in Holland, came back to football into South Africa, where he stayed for a while. We, became closer during that time. Obviously, he was overseas. We became closer during that period. And then he came into the association, got more involved in this battle. And I was sort of sitting in the middle because Andrew is this side, Kalusha is this side, I'm sitting in the middle, And at one time, we were all the three of us, including Andrew, Kalusha, and myself, drinking tea together and, having a good time. But I think when this issue of the split in football came about, I was sort of caught in the middle. And as a result, our friendship perhaps isn't what it was in the earlier days.
What did you make it sound like you inherently became closer to Andrew Kamanga than you did with Kalusha? What really happened?
People drift apart. I think probably I spent more time with Andrew than with him. He had one faction, Andrew had the other faction.
And
I've probably known Andrew been closer to Andrew than him in more recent times. So, as I said, there was a polarization where it was felt by one group that if you talk or associate with this group, you are viewed as an enemy. So I think that was the line of thinking at the time.
What was Dad's feeling at the time?
He never involved himself in it. It was absolutely...
What would be his comment in passing? Of course, publicly not involved, but could he have ignored it to the extent that he treated it like it didn't exist?
Nah, look, we are talking about people in their 40s. I think he wouldn't get involved in issues between friends at that age. We're adults, we're old enough to make our decisions. We were all three of us, maybe four of us close, and then there's a split between two friends. One group, decides that if you associate or talk with this group, you are viewed as maybe not supporting us. So, that way people in football drifted. So many people, including...
It's him that stopped talking.
Well, we kept on talking. I think we have never stopped talking. But I think there was this polarization that affected a lot of friendships, relationships in the media, in football, in the clubs. And as I said, it's still going on today.
Fast forward.
I sit on one side, I sit here. I've got friends who, say, oh, no, Kalusha this, Kalusha that. I've got friends who say, Kamanga this. But my policy is that they're my friends. And I'm not going to let this football battle between two sides impact on my personal relationships. Unless...
Is it possible to have a cup of tea with Kalusha today, tomorrow, next week, at the weekend?
The last time
Or there's need for a serious meeting to mend some bridges over the years?
Yeah, look, when we meet, we will chat. I haven't met him now probably, when did I last see Kalusha? 6-7 months. But the last time I met him, we sat down, chat. How are things? Okay, how's football? Yeah, good. How's this? How's that? But 6-7 months, a long time in life.
So it's frosty, to say the least.
Well, we haven't met. So the day we meet, we'll see whether it's frosty or not.
Because
I haven't met him.
I'm asking this because I'm thinking, if you hadn't met a friend for 10-20 years and you were that close, I think immediately you gel. You can't... fair to say, I'm going to his place to have lunch tomorrow. But would you admit that there are some issues that need to be sorted out?
I'll find out.
Before we can drink a cup of tea from the bottom of your heart.
I'll find out when we meet, because as I said, the last time we met, we chatted and, so, and we've always been cordial to each other. That has always been, even though we may not be as close as we were before, but we have always been cordial. So we will see.
After he was banned from football by FIFA, by the FIFA Ethics Committee, there's an article that we are told you authored. Did you haven't spoken? Did you ever speak to him about it?
We haven't met. Well, we haven't met since.
Never spoken yet.
Never met.
Never spoken. Over the phone, nothing.
No.
I look at social media. Some people say Ponga is jealous.
Over the article?
Yeah. They say you are a bitter man that's out there to kill the legend?
I think the article sort of gave an overview after the FIFA issue, because the FIFA ban obviously had background to it. I think the article spoke about, you know, his achievements as a player, his impact on Zambian football, but it also spoke about the difficulties that occurred during his term in FAS, and also some build-up into how, probably giving a bit of background into the ultimate ending in the ban. Probably I'll do another article post-ban, and you know.
You don't regret that article?
I think I was wearing a journalistic hat. I was not wearing a friend hat. I was wearing a journalistic hat, and I had to write the full story as I saw it, from the beginning in Muflira to the ban. And I think that was the key thing in the article, to tell the full story.
Crestfallen? Kalu. His crown was dropped, lowered.
By the
and
ban.
Is it gone?
By the ban?
Yeah.
Yes, of course, because he...
Will we ever get him back as the icon that people love and respect, in your view?
I think this split in football has split the public as well. Because, you know, if you read, you just mentioned social media. If you read social media, it has become a case where there are people for, there are people against. And, you know, when you go, something I've seen, when you go into the political side of football, then you will expect a split. Just like if somebody like Lionel Messi, who is a hero, decides to join a political party, he will have people from the opposite party against him. So as long as football has this divide of for and against, you know, he has people for, he has people against. Now, football is supposed to bring people together. So the key thing is to heal this divide in football. But whether it will be done or not remains to be seen. As long as there is this polarization, there will be a state of civil war in Zambian football, which is the case.
Is the 8-year-old boy in you that fell in love with the beautiful game shocked at what you've been able to find over the last 50 years in our football?
There are several sides to football. There's football on the pitch that the fans see, you know, that bring joy to 16 million people. That is one aspect of it. Then there's football admin, which is a different side, which is the political side, which the public don't see, but is very critical because it determines what happens on the field. The success of football depends on the administration of football. The administration of football has always been a political arena, and at the moment it is a very, very divided arena at the moment. So the results on the pitch, the forward progress of football will never be at the 100% it should be at, as long as the football house is divided.
Tell me something. 2016, Andrew Ndanga Kamanga wins the presidency in what you're calling a spirited fight, an upset. And you are offered to become the successor to George Mwilaka Sengele as General Secretary of the Football Association of Zambia. Did that come as a surprise?
I would say it did, because obviously I'd applied for the position. I think then some statements were made that I was in bad books with SuperSport, etc., which I then said, look, I would take legal action against anybody making such a statement, because I think it was implied that I couldn't work at FAS because SuperSport, being a sponsor of FAS, was in bad books with me. So I clarified. I said I worked for SuperSport for 3.5 years. I discussed with the management that I wanted to leave and form a production company of my own to do my own business. They were very happy to give me the opportunity to run programs on SuperSport, which I did. So our parting was very harmonious. I continued to appear on TV with SuperSport even after I had left the company. So for someone to insinuate that I had left on bad terms, therefore could not be eligible for the first position, I felt was unfair. So I said, it's water under the bridge. You know, I'm not on the short list. I got other stuff to do. And then I get a call to say, there's a meeting running at the moment. Your name has come up to be the General Secretary of FAS because there are issues on the selection of Mr. Simata. 90% of the executive don't want him to be the general secretary. Mr. Kamanga is alone in the fight to get Simata as the general secretary. So the EXCO is going to re-look at the whole thing, and after re-looking it, they've decided that, you know, you would be a candidate, or you would be the position available for the position.
Were you shocked as someone who knows the ins and outs of many organizations that I'm not on the short list, but how am I on the short list? Or it's probably a good thing that I am, but were you like, what's happening to this fuzz? Did any part of you ask yourself that?
I think the SuperSport issue maybe was the reason I wasn't on the short list. So, you know, I felt it was unfair, but as with all things in life, if things don't work out, I always look forward to the next move, and, you know, I never look back. So when I was told I was back in the picture, you know, I was surprised, but I thought, well, maybe I should have been in the picture in the first place.
Did you speak to Andrew Kamanga?
I spoke to him. I spoke to several people in the executive when they asked me if I was willing to sit on the executive.
I'm saying when your name was struck off, when you're not on the short list, because I'm sure he's a friend. And did you have any conversation about, but how come I'm not on the list?
There was a panel of people they had made a subcommittee to look at the nominations, and he wasn't sitting in that subcommittee of people looking at the nominations. So it was their decision as a subcommittee, or a selection committee, if you want to call it.
Was Andrew Kamanga disappointed with the decision of the subcommittee to strike off his friend from
I don't know.
good old school?
Only he can answer that.
What impression did he give you?
No, I was just told that, I was just told that the subcommittee had met, and this was their decision, you know. And I said, oh, okay. And then there was this issue of the statement about SuperSport. So I wanted to just clarify that point. But as a subcommittee, they had the right to choose anybody, shortlist anybody. It was not an obligation that my name should be there. But the only reason I was unhappy was that a reason about my bad working relationship with SuperSport was made, and I didn't agree, and that was not ever the case, that I had a bad working relationship. I mean, even today I can walk into SuperSport when called upon to be on a show.
Okay, you are finally installed as General Secretary, and your deputy is Lombe Mbalashi. What secretariat did you inherit? What kind of secretariat?
Well, it was an organization that needed quite a lot of restructuring, quite a few changes in personnel. So I would say it was probably operating at maybe 20% of where it could have been operating. So it was, you know, an organization that had probably not evolved with football in terms of the growth of football. You had a secretariat, yes, but football had grown from where it was as a social amenity to become a fully stand-alone business or commercial industry on its own. And the Secretariat hadn't matched the speed of that change. So it was going to be imperative to start to make those adjustments to bring it up to that level.
How long was it going to take when you walked in? How much time did you think you honestly needed?
Well, you know, you've got a 4-year mandate because you never know what's going to happen after the elections. So the key thing I thought was to maybe make those adjustments within probably the first 2 years or so, because you've also got people there with institutional knowledge. You've got records that maybe are not perfect. You have to sort of restructure things or rebuild records, rebuild certain aspects of the heritage of the organization to be able to move it forward. So it was always going to be a task where you had to make a change, but you had to be careful how you made that change.
I want to ask this. You walked in and it was not completely the easiest of assignments for Andrew Kamanga to install his General Secretary. It looked protracted from the outside. I want to know, from the get-go, did you have a feeling that Andrew Kamanga and yourself were going to have a really tough time to make decisions and really paint the football of Zambian football as you desired? as President and General Secretary of the association?
Well, I knew it would be a battle because, the way elections are held here, people form camps, and usually those camps tend to come into office, with a large majority of your people behind you. Now, Andrew came in, and when he campaigned, he went on his own, spoke to all the clubs. So, and then later on, probably one or two people, joined probably more favored towards him to campaign alongside him. But none of those people were elected. So he was almost virtually on his own. Now, after I had the appointment, or after I was informed that I was being approached, we had a meeting in South Africa. Probably before I was informed that I was going to be approached. We met in South Africa, over our usual tea. And then while we were chatting, he got a message that there's an EXCO meeting taking place, which he wasn't aware of, led by Mr. Richard Kazala, the Vice President. Now, Constitution says only the President can call an executive committee meeting. So a committee meeting was called behind his back without his knowledge. He's out of the country. So from then on, I knew that this thing is going to be one hell of a tough ride for him, because he's got, a meeting happening behind his back without his knowledge. And already that's against the Constitution, but it showed. And I think Mr. Kazala had already stated that, he was a Kalu man and proud of Kalusha's achievements. He made an open statement that seemed to imply that he had wished Kalusha would have been the man to win the election. So it was always going to be a tough ride for Andrew. But at that stage, I didn't know that I would also be involved, in the association. That decision came later. So it was always going to be, as I said, football is polarized, and even within the executive, there was a large split of polarization. So that made life in running football quite hard and quite difficult. I'm not going to go into the intricacies because obviously I'm bound by the fact that I served as General Secretary, not to divulge the whole intricacies of the fight, in and out issues, but I can just say the polarization continued within the EXCO and made life difficult.
You described the Football Association of Zambia, or the fraternity, as toxic when you were leaving FATS. Let me ask you this. What made you say, I can't do this anymore, I have to go? This thing is too toxic for me to continue doing.
Yeah, I think that was one of the reasons, although there were several other reasons. But from the association perspective, I was coming from a background of working most of my working life in South Africa. I think the culture shock was a little bit different. There, the board, the executive management are all in harmony. I was finding a situation where there is a split in the board, and it was a constant battle to get decisions made. I'll give you an example of going to CompuTicket, which, previously we had heard or even had evidence that executive committee members were given booklets from match day. And they generated revenue from those booklets, which went into their own pockets. Now, the first thing I said is, look, we are going to go CompuTicket because we have to have proper management and control of ticketing. This is one of our biggest sources of revenue. But there was resistance. Now, how do you have resistance over making a decision that is going to make the association more money, that is going to bring accountability, that is transparent, So it was just ridiculous. Some of the issues were resistance for the sake of resistance, Later on, it was discovered that certain members would meet before an executive meeting, have their own meetings and say, if this is said, then we must say this. So it just gives you an example of how difficult it was to run the institution and to manage the institution. And as I said, it was functioning at 20%. So to change it, you had so many leakages of documents, information, this and that. It was always going to be a hard task. But I tried to give my input, tried to give my best, tried to ensure that whatever the politics of football, the team wasn't impacted. And I always said to management, we are sitting here because of the team. Nobody comes into the stadium to watch any of us here. They come to watch the team. So whatever we do must be targeted towards ensuring that we put out the best team on the field. The politics, the differences must stay here, but the team must be out there delivering. So those were some of the difficulties I faced as CEO of the organization. But at least, whenever the team was concerned, I did my best to ensure that whatever resources they needed, and resources was always difficult because there'll never be enough. We had enough, resources going to the team, camp them early. For example, if you look at the under-20 team, we started the program probably 6 months before the end of the year, with local campings from about June. And then eventually we took them on the international campings to Spain, which, was quite costly. But we managed to do it. We gave them the best. We gave them the friendlies. We gave them opportunities, and they won COSAFA. Friendlies before even COSAFA in South Africa. The program was well structured, well run. We got the results there. We could have done more with the other teams, but difficult financial position, restructuring, battles between you spend more time putting out fires than concentrating on the job.
Was the executive committee ever united about anything in your 2 years?
Probably a little bit later down the road, it became more focused, more in harmony than in the earlier days.
After the departure of Blacko Swale and Richard Kazala?
I think the departure of those two sort of brought, a level of realization that if this house was divided, we were not going to get anywhere. And I think after their departure, the remaining members in the executive, those who maybe had previously had probably strong feelings towards supporting one side rather than the other, began now to, there was a little bit more harmony and more being on the same page. And I think it was a little bit easier after after that acrimonious departure of the two members.
Now, it was alleged that the two, Richard Kazala and Blacko Swale, were involved in financial impropriety, which, according to the narration, sounded like theft. Was it theft?
Oh, well, I suppose only a legal body or the members of the association could reach a conclusion. What happened was that a certain amount was pledged, a lesser amount was delivered, and the issues about how that lesser amount was delivered rather than the full amount was what led to the suspension of the members. At the end of the day, the council, where the members of the association, decided that it was reason for expulsion, and that was what happened.
Was there fertile ground for them to be reported to the police and take them to mainstream court to ensure that the association recovers that money, most importantly? Why did it end at them being expelled and it was seemingly A-OK at that point?
Firstly, it has to go to the council, who are the members who make up FAS. They made their decision. Whether or not there are grounds for the matter to be taken further was really a decision of the council and the association, because it's a closed body. If they felt that the matter should be taken for further investigation, they would be the ones to make that decision, and it could go to that stage. But as at now, I don't think they've ever reached that conclusion. It's a council decision. We implement what council decides.
One of your biggest highlights as General Secretary of the Football Association was us winning the under-20. But with that one, administratively came what you referred to, leakage of privileged documents or documents that belong to the Football Association of Zambia, where it was alleged that yourself and the executive committee shared what some outsiders termed as astronomical sums of money at the expense of paying players and people who provided products and services to the Football Association. Do you look at that episode with happiness, regret, or were you a victim of a situation there?
Yeah, look, firstly, preparation for that tournament began way before the first ball was kicked. So there was committees set up, there were a series of meetings, series of activities to prepare for the tournament. probably beginning as far back as September. Now, you all understand the financial difficulties, or I think probably I understand them better. The association never really has constant flow of funds. And when you aggregate the series of works and meetings that were done, and it's all paid at one time, it probably amounted to what, certain people wanted to say was astronomical. But we had so many preparatory meetings. The committees met regularly. So there's all that activity that had allowances and are recorded meeting by meeting, step by step. So for somebody to say excessive amounts were paid, I think if we had paid after each meeting, it wouldn't have been an issue. The fact that, you have to wait until resources are available, and you see the association's money comes in spells. It comes when a contract is due, you will get a payment. So there are spells where for 3-4 months, no payment will be due, and you cannot make payments because you are really just trying to live above the water.
Some people said that it was legally correct, as you put it, but they were saying you were morally wrong. You should have paid players first and yourselves later.
The players of the under-20 team?
Or players that were being owed, or suppliers and everybody that provided goods and services.
Yeah, it's very easy to point fingers at the association about suppliers, but you see, when part of the funding of this tournament didn't come through the association. It wasn't the association funding the tournament. The association didn't touch a single penny of the money that was due to suppliers. Invoices were paid through because it was the state government who were funding the event. So all the payments were channeled through the Ministry of Sport. And those are some of the maybe the misconceptions that are there about FAS not paying suppliers. I mean, you see, one comment that makes me laugh, people say, oh, even the mascot, the guy who was wearing that eagle mask, hasn't been paid by FAS. But it's not, FAS was never responsible for any payment of the tournament. It was all through the Ministry of Sport. And, we are in a difficult economic situation. The ministry pays as and when funds are available. And, they've done a great job in this difficult economic situation, to be able to, along the way, clear probably most of their outstanding bills now. So, they will clear it. And we all understand that, I'm not going to let, if I'm the one signing for at Minister of Finance, let people die in hospital and clear a football bill. I'll rather sort out the hospital issues and then sort out the football issues. Because one is life and death and one isn't. So yes, it will take time. Maybe and I've been out now almost a year. I don't know the status of those payments, but over the time I was there, as soon as funds were available, the ministry would make payments and clear the arrears, and that has been an ongoing process.
In your football life, what would you say is your best highlight, and which one is definitely going to be the worst?
I think for me, look, it's difficult to pick one. Each moment had have reasons for each moment. 1988 Olympics, one of the highlights, because we showed the world that Zambia was a team that could compete with the best. 1994, very emotional. 1994, after the crash, to reach the final of the Africa Cup of Nations. And I think winning the Under-20 championship, not only for what we did on the field, but what we did behind the scenes to run a perfect, almost perfect competition. One that CAF said in their history of Under-20 competitions, have never had competition run so smoothly and such an impactful tournament with 51,000 people in the stadium several times. So I think those three highlights. And if I were to look at my disappointments, I think when I left FAS, I felt, we could have done, or I personally could have done a better job had I been, in an environment which allowed me to. But also the feeling that, I left the house divided, and I would have loved to have played a role in bringing the harmony back together in football, which hasn't happened to date. On the field, I think we saw our level of football sink to its lowest levels around 2000, and hopefully we can raise our game to get back among the top. So it's been ups and downs, but more happier moments. The Gabon air crash was also, a devastating moment. More happier moments for me.
I'm just thinking, finally, we haven't gone to Africa Cup 2017 and 19.
Yeah,
Does that scare you?
not really, because it's a cycle I've seen before. If you look at the Netherlands, they missed 2 World Cups, and it's not the first time they've missed 2 World Cups. If you look at Egypt, after unprecedentedly winning 3 Africa Cup of Nations, went through a cycle where, you know, players were not at the same level. And I think if you turn the clock back to 2012 when we became African champions, I think 2013 the team had already gone past its peak, and we're still in the process now of creating a new team that can be competitive and that can take us back. And I think with the foundation of the under-20 team, we should probably see a nice, good decade for Zambian football, the way things are looking with that team's development.
Okay, now, being at the Liwewe's household, we probably need to catch up with a little bit of history. I understand that there's a lot of stuff you could show us about the big man and your life. I understand you grew up from here.
Yes, I lived in this house from 1974 until I went to university. Yeah, I lived in here for a long time, and I'm a regular here because I love my mom's cooking.
Oh, excellent. Mama does it best. Let's go inside and probably even say hi, hello to Mrs. Dennis Liwewe. Okay, so first picture here, it says Mr. and Mrs. Dennis Liwewe, October 23, 1963. This is the wedding, right?
That's the wedding.
But why that date?
I don't know, probably just
did you ask?
Probably just coincidence. I don't know if independence had been discussed by that date, but pure coincidence, I think. And my dad, in his very, very young days, probably.
Yeah, and the afro is complete.
Yeah, still had hair that time, and that's Mr. Watton Sinkala, who we worked with in the mines in Chingola.
Okay.
My mom was working as a nurse in Muflira, and he was working in Chingola for, I think it was the Nchanga publication or the PR department.
Wow. Okay. Nice one. Very nice. And to say that it's got nothing to do with the independence is a bit shocking. I think Dennis Liwewe is as Zambian as the Kafue River. Okay, so this one was a road to 82. What feelings did you, how long has this one been?
Wow, it's been here for a long time. This was Zambia's qualification to the Africa Cup, and obviously before Heroes, that was our main arena, that stadium. And if you recall in my dad's book, I think we have this picture as well, the book he wrote in 1985. I mean, so many great players here, legends. Just these players, you could write a whole book about them. Hangunyu, Emi Musonda, Ghost Mulenga, Michael Musonda, Alex Chola, you know, Peter Kaumba, my good friend, Janice Umulambo. I'm also still in touch with him, the late Milton Muke, Kaiser Kalambo, Willie Piri, you know, the great Willie Piri, and Jack Chanda, who again was, if you look at Zambian history, one of our greatest players. So, you know, without doubt, this is one of our best ever teams.
Favorite kit? Orange and black?
Yes, and it was replicated during our time in the association. During my time, we sort of tried and looked at the idea of bringing it back. And so far, so good. We want to maintain the heritage.
Okay, great. What do we have next?
Another wedding. I think it's the same shot we saw earlier.
It's the same one. But this one here, he looks senior now.
Okay, this is during his time at Future Search, when he got involved now in, you know, talking to retirees, giving them hope, giving them encouragement, talking about his own experience when he was retired unexpectedly, and I think he derived so much pleasure in this work, almost as much as he did in the football arena.
Awesome. A memo to my grandchildren, 1977.
Yes, that is when the president, Kaunda, honored him for his contribution to Zambian football. So I think one of his proudest moments, and of course I think that's when the next one, when my mom got qualifications as a registered nurse. I think that's Dr. Mtumba, who at the time was the Minister of Health. So it was a message for us, to our kids who came out, obviously the grandchildren, to tell them about how, you know, obviously he's from Malawi, background from Malawi, but you know, received and recognized as Zambian after his contribution to the country.
Okay. Then when you are brilliant, hardworking and well-behaved and contribute positively to the development and well-being of the country, no one will care where your grandparents came from. So it was something that was a sticky point?
No.
Having Malawian heritage?
No, it has never been. But just to tell the grandchildren that I think he was giving himself as an example, that you work hard, you are well-behaved, you are disciplined. You know, people will never look and say, no, you're not one of us. You know, you will always be well-received, whatever you do, not only as a person of the country, but in your life, if you follow those rules and conduct yourself in that way.
All right. What else do we have?
Again, this is the Future Search program. That is the late president of Malawi, Mutharika.
Bingo.
I think it was at one of the agricultural shows where the Future Search team was running one of the stands, and he was always available to be there for either the trade fair or the agricultural shows.
All right, awesome. The next one here, I'm just looking at this one. Canon Dennis Liwewe, 2004. Staunch Anglican.
Yes, 100%, like yourself and me. So, yeah, I think that was when he was being given the title of Canon, and as I said, one of his proudest moments. I think it equals the football moments as well.
All right. Well, we can tell for a fact that he wasn't only a football man, so to speak, but finally here, celebrating the life of our hero. Absolute
Yes.
legend.
This was on the 26th, the date of his burial. I think when the gentleman put this together, he asked for key moments. And I think the football moment is there, the church moment, and the honoring. So we've kept it from the date, which was 5 years ago. He was buried on the 26th, died on the 22nd of April. Very much still in our memories because he guided us, led us, you know, taught us, and very much still in our memories. So we're proud and honored that he was honored by the country by being given a state funeral.
Wow.
Something that really touched us as a family.
Thank you very much, Mr. Liwewe.
Welcome, pleasure. Always looking forward to chatting with you about football, and I'm sure we'll have many more conversations going forward.
Thank you very much.